when I look at some of those deformities, they're heavy duty, and it makes me think of neuropathic joints. And I think, Dr. Patel, you mentioned that. Is there anything you do specifically and always when you're thinking a joint is a neuropathic joint versus something else with a severe deformity? Is that a different thought process altogether or not?
Uh,
Yes, Kailash.
Yeah, basically in neuropathic joints, the thought process is going to be having a balanced knee. You are going to have a ligamentous laxity. There's going to be a soft tissue which is going to be completely damaged without any sensation. So rather, I would have something which is going to hold the knee together rather than putting something which is completely dependent upon the ligaments or the soft tissue around the knee. And that's the only thought process which goes on when I'm addressing these neuropathic joints.
So what happens in neuropathic joints in our experience, initially we tried some, they do well for 6 months to a year if you don't add constraint, but then they fail very early. We've, burnt our fingers with this. So whenever we are dealing with neuropathic joint, which is proved on a EMG nerve conduction study, if the patient is diabetic, what we would do is always add constraint. The minimum is to go to a LCCK or TC3, and at times don't hesitate even to use a hinge.
Okay. There is a question from Sachin Tapazvi.
Yeah.
Where are you?
He's right in front. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah, thanks, Brad, and thanks, Mohit, and great talk, Parag, and also by Kailash and Sunny. Parag, I think my question is especially is directed to those varus deformities where you have a varus intra-articular, but you also have a bowing of the tibia or of the femur, which is not necessarily at the metaphyseal level, but at a diaphyseal level. So we try to correct deformity that encompasses the whole lower limb per se, consisting of some deformity in the proximal femur, mid femur, distal femur, in the joint and distally as well, by doing a complete correction at the knee. So what I want to know is that what is the current evidence on correction of deformities by a knee replacement? Do they survive as much, or do we expect some form of change in the outcomes?
Yeah, thanks, Sachin, for that question. It's an excellent question. And this brings us to the importance of pre-op planning and having the long leg x-rays, because many times there are many of us, including me, who initially used to just take short films, and these kind of deformities which Sachin is talking about, the bow legs or the bow femur or the tibia vara, the constitutional varus, which we say can get missed. So when you do long leg x-rays, these are the deformities which you will see. And once you've identified them, they are have to be treated differently. The importance in this is, if during your surgery, you can get an all intra-articular correction, then that is my first option, Sachin. And that is if in case by preoperative, in preoperative planning, I would know whether it's possible or not. If one of the articles by Wang and Wang have shown that in the deformity, if my cut is going above the epicondyles in the femur or below the tibial or the fibular head on the tibial side, and the cut is increasing that, then I will consider an osteotomy in this case. But with my experience, I have seen that if you can do an all intra-articular procedure and balance these knees off, and you can get your mechanical axis right, then they do well. But these are the patients who need constraint to be added. And if you don't do that, then the longevity of this has been shown to be reduced. Another important question is, which follows on with this, Sachin, is to introduce the topic of how much do you correct. And here is where the supporters of the kinematic knees, the kinematic axis balancers, or having the kinematic axis comes in. And people have been talking about it, and they say that, don't fully correct. Leave the knees in slightly varus, which is the tibia vara. And if you overcorrect them, then these fail actually faster. So what I have done is, I really don't go all the way, as long as I can balance them well. I'm not really worried of leaving them a little in varus. I don't worry about it. And I've seen that these patients do well. The answer to this specific thing is, I really don't know how much they would do, how long term. But if you have a well-balanced knee with a good alignment, I don't mind keeping them in slight varus. So I accept slight varus, but I will not leave them unbalanced. So that's my take on your question, Sachin.
Okay. Okay. I think you had a comment, Kailash.
Yeah, I just want to just add on, if you're considering in cases of extra-articular deformities, would you consider an tibia vara or a femoral vara as an extra-articular deformity? And would you like to correct it as just like what you mentioned right now, or would you like to still keep it in a little bit of constitutional varus just to get the kinematics right?
We can manage it with the all intra-articular technique. I need not do osteotomies, and most of the times I can get away in this. And I don't worry because these are pre-existing, and I don't really worry if I leave them in a slight varus, which is told to us by the kinematic guys.
Quick comment on navigation.
I'm not a big fan of navigation, though navigation is something which can actually help in these kind of cases. But if you've been using navigation for all, then you can use navigation.
We have a question actually from Pankaj. Pankaj, did you want to come on video and just ask?
Yeah. Okay. So in the same breath, in continuation to Dr. Tapaswi's question, we recently, there's an article by Tan et al. On valgus cut angle in severely deformed knees. And if we take severe bowing of the femur, varus bowing, and also of the tibia, then the valgus cut angle is actually in such a way that the medial space doesn't open up unless we have done extensive releases. So either in such a case, the kinematic alignment guy would do some cutting of the bone, extra cutting of the bone, while somebody who's doing gap balancing will do more of releases. So I just wanted to ask Dr. Parag Sancheti about his take on it and what kind of extra releases. I mean, I have tried in few patients, and sometimes I have to release for quite a long time and do the posterior middle capsular release also to actually get the correction.
Yeah, excellent question. So, it's all about balancing. But what I have seen is that my threshold for going all the way for balancing and releasing the superficial MCL in this has gone down. What happens is that don't touch the superficial MCL as far as possible. Go by the posteromedial release. And I find that in these kind of cases, doing a pie crusting is very good. And the last structure which you touch is the popliteus. And I've seen that if the knee is preoperatively subluxated, then if you release the popliteus just by taking a few pie crusting nicks with it, then the knee balances off. It's more about balance for me in these kind of cases, Pankaj.
On that note, I'd ask, because we talked about balance, do you have any clear tips and tricks about when you know it's balanced? Like you're using gap measurements, you're using tensioners, you're using that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So for me, I need to have the knee balanced in extension and inflection at 90 degrees, and I would take them through a range of motion from 0 to 90. In extension is important for me. After I finish my distal femoral cut and proximal tibial cut, I will put in a spacer and just check the varus valgus movement. If the opening is more on the lateral side, which is usually the case in varus knees, and tight on the medial side, I will continue my release till I get it balanced in extension. Once I am happy that it is balanced in extension, I go to the balancing in flexion. And in addition to a bit of soft tissue release, in flexion, I go by the rotation of the femoral component more than balancing. And I would not hesitate to rotate the femoral component externally as much as it is required to go parallel to the tibial cut. That is the Ranawat technique which I follow. And at times, instead of 3 degree, 4 degree external rotation, I have seen that I go as much as 6 or 7 degrees of external rotation, and then balance of the knee in flexion, which is more by rotation of the femoral component. And I have seen that once I balance the knee, I am able to, get a well-balanced knee in flexion as well as extension. If it is a wee bit tight on the medial side, I don't worry. It opens out a period of 4 or 6 weeks, rather than get into a situation where you kind of open it up too much and you have those oops moment. And when the superficial MCL has come off, then that's a bad situation to be in. So just a little bit of under balancing, keeping it a wee bit tight on the medial side. I don't worry, it opens out. And this is the way I balance it in flexion and as well as extension.
So if I can just take a step back to all of you on the panel, when you think about these patients with very severe deformities, it dawns on me that there must be a considerable amount of counseling you're doing, Parag, around expectations. What is that discussion like in these patients? And is there ever a situation where you say, no, I don't think we're going to need, we are not going to do this for you because of the expectations aren't aligning for the patient and the surgeon? Can you speak a little bit to that? Because so much about this is that early discussion, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just give you what I feel, and then Sunny and Kailash, you can add on a bit. So it's all about patient expectations, Mohit. And if I have seen that if you tell these patients pre-operatively the complications which they can expect, and tell them that, we'll not try and correct you fully and just leave you a little bit deformed, and explain to them that the results of this as compared to a result in a conventional TKR are different, then they are happy. It's all about patient expectations, and we have seen that these are the patients who actually take a little longer to have complete pain relief, and some of these patients actually complain for as long as 6 months. And have we counseled them before then, and they're happy with it? Otherwise, these patients can be happy and their expectations are not met for a longer time. So over to Sunny for a few comments.
Yeah, such patients with severe deformities, counseling them for a need of total knee replacement is not difficult. Rather than that, counseling about their expectations. Many of these patients are either neglected patients or they come late because of some family reasons or economic reasons, and for knee replacement. So for them, getting back to their routine activities like squatting, sitting cross-legged are the main important requirements. But if we have adequate dialogue with them that, yeah, we can correct the deformity, which is but obvious. But after that, if you expect good functional outcome, the pain is going to be there for a little longer period of time because of sudden correction of deformities, stretching of the soft tissues. And if they're adequately counseled, after 3 to 4 months, they really do well. I don't see there should be a major concern about the counseling part. Over to Kailash.
Yeah, thanks, Sunny. So I would rather totally agree with both of you in the sense that these patients, when they're coming to you, they come in pretty late. They're living with that kind of pain and deformity for such a long time that when you are giving them a knee which is round about 90 to 95% of what normally you expect, these patients really are happy at the end of the day. And I think counseling them regarding that, what correction they are going to expect, see, that first question is going to be, is the pain going to go away? Yes, the pain is going to go away. Is my deformity going to be corrected? Yes, the deformity is also going to be corrected. So at the end of the day, they are going to find whatever they are looking for in a total knee replacement. So I think if you counsel them in such a sense that they know that their main complaints regarding what their lifestyle is are going to go away and they're going to get a better one than what they are already having, I think they should do pretty well.
Right. Perfect. So I think that's a wonderful question, Mohit. So any comments from, I can see a lot of colleagues from India who have tuned in, and, what I would like to say is, does anybody want to share their experience, and is it something which we haven't covered? Please feel free to jump in right now. And I can see many faces, Dr. Nima from Indore, Dr. Ashish from Patna, who deal with a lot of these deformities. I can see some people who also use robotics. So anybody wants to just quickly come in, we have just about 3 or 4 minutes left, and make a quick comment on what we spoke about.
Everyone is happy. That's good.
Dr. Nima? I can see Surendra here. Surendra, unmute yourself. And are you sitting in Goa, Surendra? Unmute, yeah.
No, sir. No, sir. It was a wonderful session as usual. Very good share pearls of wisdom been shared by you, Kailash and Sunny. Nice to listen them once again. And definitely thanks a lot for arranging this webinar. It was a great webinar. Thank you.
So, Kiran or Dr. Nima, any quick comments? Unmute yourself, Dr. Nima. You have to unmute.
Just I want to ask views of the experts on the Savvasta's approach, because I've experienced that it keeps the patellar tracking very well in place. Is there any views from the experts?
So regarding the subvastus approach, there was a time, Dr. Nima, when I used that, and what I've seen is that the problem is near the tibial tuberosity. When you're doing the releasing, at times you have to cut more, and there are issues with the patellar tendon. I gave it up a long time back, and of course, immediate post-op, the pain relief is better. They come back, with the knee flexion, and the quadriceps inhibition is very less. The patellar tracking is definitely good, but if you see the same patients at the end of 8 weeks, they do equally well to the conventional arthrotomy. So I gave up the subvastus approach, and especially in obese patients or patients who have severe deformities, it's not a good approach. But for conventional knees, thin patients, it is a little better. Immediate post-op, the patellar tracking is surely better. Their pain relief is faster, but at 6 weeks, the difference is very negligible between the subvastus approach as versus the medial parapatellar conventional arthrotomy. So I've actually stopped using the subvastus approach.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, Parag, can you also maybe respond to this issue? There's going to be many who see these complex injuries and think, okay, maybe I should tackle this. But the reality is not every surgeon should be doing complex knee injury work. How does one who's interested or seeing these patients either get the appropriate training? What is the pathway for someone to get to be starting to do these? When should you realize, okay, this is too much?
Yeah, so excellent question, Mohit. I think, whenever you're dealing with such severe deformities, you have a patient, I would not dwell upon them unless I have done 50 to 100 conventional cases. But once I am confronted with such a case, my approach would be to talk to a colleague, keep him in the loop if required, get him into the OR, and he helps you with your first few cases, and discuss these cases with your peers. Or there are now so many groups which are there where you can put up cases and get some help. So these are the cases. What I would advise is, don't deal on them. Don't think they're similar to your conventional TKRs. 3 things: discuss with your peers, be ready with some kind of constraint which may be required, and keep a colleague handy, or keep him in the OR where he helps you with the case. And once you've done a few of these, then you can think of doing it independently, because they are a little different and they require a different approach as compared to a conventional non-complex total knee replacement.
No, very good. Is there anyone who has any final questions or comments that we can raise? Otherwise, we will begin to go to our closing statements from our panel.
Yeah, so I think that's good. So before we close, I want to thank Mohit. And Mohit, as I said initially, you've been really working overtime and working so hard to bring all of this together. I want to thank you, and I just want to announce that in exactly 25 minutes from now, we have an excellent talk by Mohit Bhandari, and we will share the link of that talk. And that talk is going to be on 5 tips for a successful practice. So that is something which I am going to look forward to hear. So we will share the link, or just with all the people who've joined. But thanks, Mohit, once again for having us. Over to Kailash for his final comments.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Parag Sancheti, for letting me on this session. Dr. Mohit Bhandari, thank you so much for letting me on this platform. And it was a wonderful session. We had a lot of discussion also. And thank you all the panelists who have come. And at this time in India, most of them are in their clinics and doing their practice, and still they managed to come here. So a big thank you to all of them. Over to you, Dr. Sunny.
Hi, great effort, Dr. Mohit, and I'd like to thank Dr. Parag for giving this opportunity. And it was an excellent interactive session. Like the questions that were asked by Dr. Sachin, Dr. Pankaj really gave a deep insight to the thoughts, and we should not neglect certain important key points. Extensive webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad, and thanks, Mohit, and thanks most of all, Abby Payne. She's taking a lot of pain, to take us through this.
She's behind the scenes making this all happen. But the point I would say, and I think I speak for Brad and all of us, is we've all been webinared. We've seen so many webinars and amazing webinars. I think the offerings from India have been better and better and better, which is superb. But we see so much, and I think we're at a point now where we're looking to connect. While we can't be in the same room together, I'm hopeful that these smaller group sessions, what we've been doing, have been helpful to you, because I think just seeing each other sometimes allows us to have a deeper discussion. So that's been the purpose of this, and I'm on a personal level just delighted to be able to see many of you and feel connected in a time where I think we all need to feel more connected. Thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you at more events. Take care, everyone.